And so I'm really challenging that way of thinking about the city building process. And so that because Black people didn't have that kind of formal power in government, in educational institutions and all of that, doesn't mean that they were not impacting the landscape of the urban environment. And every time that they built a church, they influenced the landscape.
Imuna listeners, we are back with Dr. Joe William Trotter Jr., a professor of history and social justice at Carnegie Mellon University. In an earlier episode, we talked with Dr. Trotter about his journey as a historian who became an expert on African American history, particularly urban labor. Today, we're discussing one of Dr. Trotter's latest books, Building the Black City, The Transformation of American Life. Welcome back, Dr. Trotter.
Thank you.
Tell us about this book. Why did you write it? Why now? As well as a little bit about what it's about.
Okay. This book is a sequel to an earlier book that I wrote. In 2019, before the pandemic hit, I wrote a book called Workers on Arrival. And it deals with Black workers in the building of America and the way in which their labor was exploited as enslaved people initially, and then later as free workers. And so in a way, that book was about Black people's victimization and the profits that they created through the exploitation of their labor. You know, that owners of enslaved people and employers of Black industrial workers and so on were able to enrich themselves through the way in which they recruited and exploited African American labor. And so in that book, I do call attention to the agency of Black workers and the way they responded and rejected these injustices.
Mm-hmm.
But the story that I was trying to tell was so big in terms of the issues involved that I said, you know, there's another story that has to be written. And Building the Black City was the story that I felt I couldn't tell fully inside of that other book, because that other book was so weighted down with showing the inequality that it couldn't quite get to the creativity that these same people exhibited. So the book, Building the Black City, in other words, it runs on two tracks. It says, first of all, that Black people built the predominantly white city through unequal labor, unequal pay, unequal conditions, even dangerous conditions. But on top of that, they went home and they double taxed their labor to build another city that served their own needs and the needs of their families and their communities.
Mm.
And so that was the city that they built for themselves. That other city was a city of, in many ways, coercion, injustice, and so on. And so this story then tries to show the ways in which African Americans constructed their city.
Mm-hmm.
And it gets away from this ideal that we can't simply see the city as some formal economists, political scientists, and so on may see it. Too often people define the city as a municipality in which political elites and economic elites, they control the city, they control the politics, they control the culture and the institution. And so how in the world are you going to say Black people were able to build a Black city? Mm-hmm. And so I'm really challenging that way of thinking about the city building process. And so that because Black people didn't have that kind of formal power in government, in educational institutions and all of that, doesn't mean that they were not impacting the landscape of the urban environment. And every time that they built a church, they influenced the landscape. Every time they built a fraternal hall or building so that they could fellowship with each other, or a women's club house. And there were many women's club houses built over the period of the industrial period. And so I'm saying that they were building institutions across this country, even as they were helping to build predominantly white institutions that they could not even attend. They could not even get a ticket to go in. Theaters, hotels, all kinds of music. And so that's the story. And then when you look at the number and types of businesses that Black people were building within their communities, the insurance companies, the Madam C.J. Walker line of beauty shops and all of those things, I argue, is the way in which African Americans, and at the same time, this study tries to systematically show that Black people are affected and also, you might say, help build their own city through the way they occupied homes in the urban environment. And so I treat the occupancy of homes that they own as a special kind of environment, because there were few of us until much later who were actually home owners. But then I say we can't restrict the impact of Black people on the urban environment and the development of their own spaces by treating only home ownership. And so I add rental spaces. Black people rented a place and they occupied it as a home that is treated as part of their impact on the landscape, part of their way of constructing a space within the context of a city that tries to exclude them from almost everything. And so we go through that process in the book of establishing the spatial dynamics of this Black city, so that some homes are really clustered close together, in which they start to build churches right alongside and in some cases next to. And so we begin to see, hey, these people are not just living, they are constructing, they are building, they are creating. And all of those things that they built in some way served a need that they identified as a need of their community.
Wow. Wow. So when readers encounter this book or your other work, what do you most hope they come away seeing differently about Black workers and Black communities?
Well, I do want to say something about Black workers and Black educated professional and business people. There is no doubt in my book, in my work, I emphasize the tremendous role that working class Black people play in the development of their communities. But it's also a story about multi-class collaboration, so that Black institutions are not, in many cases, simply a single class institution where only workers, occupy or congregate. It's a multi-class institution most often in which Black business and professional people are interacting and collaborating with poor and working class Blacks to build churches, fraternal orders, and all kinds of businesses and so on. So I try to make that kind of, it's a more complicated argument than sometimes meet the eye. Um, but what I want people to take away from the book in all of this is I want them to be able to conceptualize Black people as city builders. They're not just occupying a house or congregating in a church or going to a barbershop when you look at the totality of what they are doing, they are constructing a city, a community that serves multiple needs and connect them with multiple people across multiple neighborhoods and spaces.
Mhm.
And they create a sense of unity within those spaces. Even if they are separated by so many, you know, blocks, miles, or so on, they are still connected with each other through their interactions. And when we look at the Black press, you can begin to see how they forge identities through these networks of community building and institution. So I want people to begin conceptualizing the community in a broader way, you know. And and it is true that some of the residents of the Black city may focus primarily on developing their insurance company or developing their barbershop.
Mhm.
But they are all very aware that this is a piece in a larger puzzle
Right.
about how Black people are constructing an environment that will service their needs and ensure their survival. And
Mhm.
by the way, these institutions, they're not just there to serve these, the needs of a barbershop or the needs of a restaurant or funeral home. When you talk politics, those institutions are mobilized as major supporters
Yeah.
and major facilitators. And anybody who wants to start a movement that the community sees as in its best interest, then
Mhm.
you can come to my barbershop. You can drop something off at my restaurant. You can come here and you can strategize. And so those institutions are in turn leveraged for these big, large liberation movements that Black people launch,
Mhm.
whether it
Mhm.
be to desegregate something or whether it be to protest a particular practice that has become intolerable. Those institutions serve as the foundation through which change is affected,
Mm.
you know. And those institutions played that role in the abolition of slavery. Without them, when we look back now, we know that we had a lot of white allies in the abolitionist movement. But the literature on that today shows that Black people were at the very core of those movements to dismantle the slave
Mhm.
system.
Mhm.
And then when you fast forward to Jim Crow, those same institutions proliferating in numbers, concentrating in terms of spatial, becomes even more powerful to challenge Jim Crow, to envision that there is an injustice to the entire community. And then they use these institutions, they leverage them to build a movement that will desegregate, that will open up opportunities, force the employment of Black people in certain places as they've
Mhm.
never been employed before. So
Mhm.
that's why I think the Black city, we need it more than ever today because people have tried to trim back the achievements of the
Yeah.
modern
Yeah.
civil rights and Black power movement, trying to
Yeah.
trim them back. And every time people trim something back from the community realizes just how important it is to sustain all those institutions that they've built in the past and to create new ones
Right.
along the way to really address the current need.
Wow. Wow. Have readers ever shared a response that stayed with you?
Did you say readers
Uh-huh.
of the book?
Of your books? Uh-huh. And they shared
Um,
a response that stayed with you?
that's a good question to raise, but I'm just so happy when people say, I enjoy the book. I got a lot out of it. um, but yeah, some scholars, they really are. In fact, let me tell you, Tamara, I do have a symposium, so I should tell you that,
Okay.
um, where a team of scholars have really weighed in on the entire book. And they responded. to the
Okay.
arguments that I'm making. And all of them show that they appreciate. This is a Journal of Urban History forum.
Uh-huh.
It's called something like Building the Black City, sort of rethinking or that type of thing. And so,
Uh-huh.
yeah, so I do have some good accolades in that way. And by
Mhm.
the way, I also got, if we think about what's memorable, the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, they
Mhm.
did a plenary session
Okay.
on my work. And that,
Wow.
yeah, and that was a great um, memory for me that I hold dear.
Wow, that's great. Um, what does it mean to you when working class families see themselves in your work?
I'm hoping, that, working class families are not what you might call homogeneous either, right?
Mm,
Working class families, let's say working class families can be situated somewhat different in terms of their capacity to, to educate the children, send them to college, get proper health care and all of that. So I'm beginning to think a little bit more, and something I want to think about more is the way in which, I often talk about the working class as a unit,
mhm,
in
mhm,
which the people sharing certain experiences, together as part of this bottom tier, of the class structure.
mhm.
Um, but that bottom tier is never um, uniform. There's always
Right.
people in there who have debates going on, struggles with each other, and all of that.
Mhm.
And I'm just hoping that working people who read my book, working families who read my book, will be encouraged by the emphasis on the ability of working people to shape and give direction to their own lives.
Mm,
And I try to celebrate the degree to which they are able to do that. And it's always against the odds,
right.
like sending somebody to college against the odds, you know, or maybe even saving enough money to buy a home against the odds.
Right.
But all kinds of things that they do and they accomplish normally, in many ways, is against the odds. And those accomplishments become even more meaningful. And I'm hoping that they'll see this book as a way to acknowledge, and then because I do put emphasis on even small institutions that may be like some churches.
Mhm.
They may be neighborhood churches serving maybe only a few blocks. But as long as they're committed to it and keep it open and continue to serve, that's a great accomplishment. That's an
Mm,
achievement.
mhm.
Um,
Okay. Do you think your books changed the field or changed people?
well, because I work in an academic environment, I think my books are not as well disseminated among the people I really write about
Mhm.
as I would like.
Mhm.
Um, and because people do have different ways of gaining their knowledge, and because I'm not a great, you might say, regular media, you know, um, lecturer or whatever, to
Mhm.
really get inside of those networks where people, outside of academia congregate and talk and have. And so I'll have to say that my work has been most influential in the academy,
Okay.
and that I'm hoping that through influencing the next generation of young people, that some of the people who really are influenced by my work will have those networks of contact with a broader and deeper working class audience. And I know some of that is happening right now. We're inviting a scholar to speak in the Black History Month program this year.
Mhm.
He just finished a book on Atlanta, and
Okay.
it is a book about working class families in late 20th and early 21st century Atlanta. And he's talking about the tensions within the community and the way working people are really contending with some of the more elite policymakers in Atlanta and creating a dynamic environment. And so yes, and his name is Augustus Wood, and his
Okay.
book is on Atlanta, and I recommend it to everybody I come in contact with because he's a pioneer young historian, and he's going to take this story forward and deepen it. And he's already well connected with the labor movement. And so he's really pushing, a better perspective on African American history that is reflected in the work he's doing and the work that I'm doing and some others.
Okay. Okay. That's great. That's great. So, Dr. Trotter, let's, before we end, play a little game with Imuna listeners. You ready?
Yeah.
So, listeners, audience, because you all are also seeing us,
Okay.
I will say, did you know, and make a statement, and Dr. Trotter will give a brief explanation based on his wealth of knowledge and massive research of African American history. So I want you, it would be nice if you had a pen and paper and you could write down the statements and kind of jot, what his comments are with each did you know. But here we go. Did you know Black neighborhoods in America's cities weren't accidents?
I
Okay, Dr. Trotter.
You want me to respond to that, right? That's
Uh-huh.
the game. That's
Uh-huh.
the game plan. Yeah, I think that's an important way to frame it. People have to believe and see that Black people are intentional about building their spaces. Even when they rent spaces, they do things that they must do because often landlords in these poor neighborhoods will not do all the repairs. And so they have to really be creative in taking care of spaces that they invest some of their energy and time into in order to offset some of the, hazards of living in environments that are not healthy and that is not well repaired. And
Uh-huh.
so, yes, definitely people should know Black people are thinking all the time about uh, shaping the environment in which they live, either through homes, through businesses, through churches, fraternal orders, social clubs. Yes, very deliberate.
Okay. Did you know, audience, the Black city was built mostly by everyday working people?
I, that's for me again.
Yeah,
For okay,
go right ahead.
I actually say I like that because in building the Black city, I do try to talk about the way in which um, people build. Let's take churches again. Churches is a major one, right? They
Mhm,
often would buy, have a building fund, raise the
mhm,
money, and then they would actually do the building,
mhm,
like digging the foundation and laying brick and, doing the carpentry work. And so, yeah, these people with skills and some people with what would be considered not necessarily skilled craft jobs, but who know how to work to assist in building a structure. And so, yeah, and so some of these buildings were literally, um, build after people work all day, they will come to the church and they would do another 3 or 4 hours on that building. And so
mhm.
these kinds of ways of working are widespread in the Black community.
And this, did you know, I was thinking, wow, I hadn't even thought about this. So, did you know Black churches once functioned like full service community centers?
Yeah, that is a good one to talk about. I think that I put a lot of emphasis in the book on some of the material dimensions of black churches. But those churches, the spiritual dynamics were embedded in those institutions. And the one thing that the historical record sometimes doesn't give us as much as we would like,
Mhm,
and maybe because I'm a labor historian, I'm interested in that labor dynamic, right?
Mm-hmm.
We need more internal look at sermons, the content of sermons, and the
Wow.
kind of programs that take place inside the sanctuaries of these places. And we don't have that information at our disposal as much as we would like. I
Mm-hmm.
know that in one of my books on West Virginia, Cold Class and Color, I found some great sermon texts. And so I was able to really talk a lot more about what this minister was talking about on a particular Sunday and how the audience was responding in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
And so I
Mm-hmm.
do think that I don't want to eliminate the idea that the spirituality, the spiritual dimensions of this church building was important to them. And in some cases, it was the spark that helped them to move and endure and do it on a regular basis. So they had something besides just their material interest in mind as they were building these institutions. I don't want to undercut that.
Okay, okay. I have more, but I won't put you
Okay.
through any more of that.
Okay.
But
All
I
right.
do want to thank you. Thank you so much. This has been so much fun. So much
Thank
fun. And listen, I want you guys to go get the book because it will blow your mind. Some of the things I was reading, I was like, oh my goodness. Some
you.
things that when he was talking about the past, it seems like he was talking about the current today. I was like, oh my goodness. So it's a good book and you can get it on Amazon, right?
Yeah.
Amazon
Yes.
and also through the
Actually, it's the University of California Press. Uh,
University of California
yeah,
Press.
yeah,
Okay.
but if they Google it online, all kind of outlets will come up, and they
Okay.
can find it in different places.
Great.
And in some
Great.
cases, they may be able to find one somebody have already read and decided to sell it, and then the price goes way down. And it is in paper and hardbound.
Oh, good. Okay. Okay. So, building the Black City tells a truth we need to keep hearing. Black working people built more than neighborhoods, they built dignity, community, and hope. What they built still stands in us, and that living inheritance is Imuna. We're glad you joined us today, and take care and live in victory.
Thank you.
Did you know you could support this show by downloading and becoming a member of the Alive Podcast Network app? You'll experience unlimited access to Black hosted content, and we'll be able to keep bringing you amazing content week after week.